Hello, I'm Nathan with Modern Deployment IT blog. My goal is to provide real-world IT guides and experiences from the field. Today I wanted to share with you a new SCCM feature in SCCM Current Branch 1906, Application Groups. I'm excited about this new feature, so let's get into how this functions and how this works. Application Groups. So the agenda. What are the key features and benefits of application groups within SCCM? What are the requirements and known issues? We'll go through a demonstration using the lab environment, Hyper-V rather. And finally, we'll go through log files and troubleshooting. Okay, so let's get started. Our agenda. So the first thing are the key features and benefits. Number one, application groups will allow you to create a group of applications, app model apps, not packages, that can be used to send to a user or a device collection as a single deployment. So this is great for business units when you have application personas within your organization. So this new feature is also a pre-release feature that must be enabled when you do an in-console update to 1906. Or if you've already upgraded to 1906, you can go back and enable the feature, turn it on within the feature section of updates and services in node within the console. All of the metadata specified about the app group is seen in Software Single as a single entry. You can also use icons for the application group. So let's say, for example, you have a sales icon or HR or IT icon. You can also order the apps to make sure that they install it in a specific order within the group, sort of like a task sequence. Now, one note here, you still have to understand that this cannot be used in an OSD task sequence. So you're still going to need to use a custom LTI such as UDI or what are some other ones I've seen? UI++, some other ones in the industry. Requirements and known issues. So the first thing is that from a requirement perspective, Microsoft wants to make sure that you update all your SCCM clients and site servers to 1906 before you enable this feature. But don't try to enable this application group until you've updated all of your site servers, your entire hierarchy, all your targeted clients as well. So you also want to make sure that your SCCM clients are healthy and in a good known working state, the test machines. Of course, you want to enable this in a test environment or in a dev environment first, dev SCCM environment, before deploying this to production. Not recommended to do this straight away, but test in a dev environment first or lab. Also, apps in the group can only contain, so the app model apps that you create, they can only be Windows installer or script deployment types. So, and also the deployment type installation behavior has to be set to install for system. So that means that you can't use vApp virtualization apps or Windows Store for business apps, AppX bundles, iPhone apps, etc. Now, one thing to note when we look at the release notes from Microsoft regarding the current issues, you currently can only deploy to a device collection, even though they mentioned in their release notes that you can deploy to a user collection. You can't deploy to a user collection at this time. Okay, so that's disappointing, but hopefully they'll have that ability in the future. So right now it can only be device collections, so hopefully that will change later. Before we get into the demo, I want to jump ahead actually to the log files and troubleshooting. I actually did a deployment of this to test for this video, and these are the log files for the troubleshooting that Microsoft calls out: app group handler, app enforce, and settings agent. I noticed that in preparation for this video, I created a global sales application group, and I created some text files and URLs and the name of the group that I wanted to create for the application group. I noticed that if you use an apostrophe character within the description when you're creating the application group, all of the application groups that you've deployed before will not show up in Software Center. So that's very strange. So apparently it looks like when it aggregates the policy information for the app group, when it gets to anything that has the character apostrophe, and there's probably other characters that SCCM doesn't like. I haven't noticed this before until now, so that's very interesting. You can't use special characters such as apostrophe, or the actual application group will actually fail. So that's something to be aware of, and I'll show you that in the environment when we get started. So let's look at our lab environment. So this is the application group that I already created. I just wanted to highlight this first, what I'm talking about with the special characters. So nothing there. So what I did was I had the word what's apostrophe S here, and when I deployed this, well, before I deployed this existing one, this test app group for IT, showed up fine on my test machines in Software Center without an issue. As soon as I deployed this second one, and I had an apostrophe in here, so let's say you do like this, it actually failed to literally all of the existing application groups. I just had one, did not show up in Software Center anymore. When I looked at the log files on the machine, the settings agent log file, it looked like this. I got errors, these particular errors. I might write a separate blog post specifically about this, or just call it out somehow. I wasn't aware that you couldn't use apostrophes. So that makes sense if that's in SQL, but apparently SCCM, when it aggregates and does policy, it actually, I guess it does make sense, because application model apps, I believe they query the SCCM site server database, not necessarily the database, but the site server, which then queries the database. It does this dynamically on the fly. So perhaps when it runs, it gets to this and doesn't know how to deal with it. So that's what happened with that failure. So just something to be aware of. So in our environment, the first thing you want to do is make sure you're obviously on SCCM 1906. Make sure your hierarchy, if you're using a CAS or primary, a CAS with child primaries and secondary sites, make sure they're all updated to the client version. Make sure also, as we mentioned in the notes, that your SCCM client itself is also patched to the latest version. So in this case, 8853/1006. That should reflect what we see in the console. So if you need to, if during the in-console update you did not enable application groups, you can right click on this and choose turn on. Okay, you can turn that on here. So let's start from scratch again. So I'm going to create a new sales department application group. This time I'm going to call it R2, and I'm not going to include the apostrophe. So just copy this. Go create application group. And before I start there, let me just show you what it looks like in Software Center first and foremost before we get started. So again, this is what it should look like. Existing apps that you have, app model apps or packages, and these are the new application groups. So you provide a description. So notice I changed the text to no apostrophe S. I just spelled out the word what is new for sales. So I imagine this might be an issue for all the various fields within I'm guessing within the properties of app model apps as well as application groups in this case. Okay, so something just to be aware of. So back in our console here on the site server, we'll call this R2. Today is the date for the published app. Now, if you change this localization name to a different name here at the end, so this means that this is the way it will show up in Software Center. So localized application name means how it will be listed in Software Center. So just make sure that you have your names match. So let me just copy this again. Make sure my names match. Category, sales department. User documentation. So I'll select this. That'll be the link. Text. So this is the important part. Do not use apostrophes. Lesson learned. Okay? Doesn't like that. I would imagine not in any of the fields. Don't use apostrophe or other strange characters, or your application groups will completely stop showing in Software Center. Don't you love it when you learn a lesson? Testing something. Okay, so we'll fill out the description. Again, I'm not going to change this to release 2. Not going to make sure I don't have any special weird characters. I'll choose this icon. That. So that's good. It's English. Next. I'm going to add my applications here. So we're going to do Cisco Web, Greenshot utility, Firefox, Microsoft Teams, 7-zip utility, and Slack. Machine wide. So let's do this. Shot. I won't do Office because it takes a little while, so it's going to run a little while, 15-20 minutes through the video. I'd rather not watch paint dry, but I'm confident all those apps were working as expected. So 2, 5, 6, 2, 3, 5, 6. So that's right. Let's change the install order so you can move these up and down. So let's imagine I want to do 7-zip after. I want to do Slack as the last app. Maybe you have Office, and it really doesn't matter, right? The total deployment time is going to dictate the install time for each one of these. But you can change the install order here. So get a summary. Close. Now the weird part is, it would have been nice if it would have given me that error as I was incorrectly typing the character. So that would have been ideal in my humble opinion. One thing to note, if you have an existing deployment, the same is true for app model apps. If you try to delete this and it's already been deployed, it will give you a warning, or it won't let you delete it until you delete the actual deployment. So I have all my apps packaged. As we mentioned earlier, you cannot use the deployment type of any other deployment type except for Windows installer and script installer. So no app v apps. You can do that for standard apps, standard app model apps, but not for application groups. So hopefully, that's the future. Maybe that will change in the future. I'm not sure what other releases. Okay, so just be aware of that. So I'm going to deploy our application group to all systems. Now in production, I would not recommend that you do this. In a lab, it's okay as long as you're testing it and you make sure that you make it as available and not required. If you're doing this in production, I would highly recommend that you do it in a lab first and make sure everything is tested and working and functioning, and so you thoroughly understand. So I'm going to make this available. I'm going to set the date to the previous to today and not in the future, so that I can go ahead and not have to wait for this. Today is the 7th. Set the clock back on this so the content's available. Okay, I'm okay with Software Center notifications. Let's make sure that we're doing this as available to all systems, especially. Be careful. Next. Summary and close. Okay, so that's that. Application groups. Let's look at our virtual machine. This is the virtual machine that I use to test all the various different apps for app model apps. I wanted to make so as part of your validation, make sure all your apps are installing correctly as expected first before you start to deploy application groups. We'll do a policy refresh a few times. I just want to see this. I'm not going to install that new application group on this machine. I just want to see that it shows up. Okay, sweet. So you see that? So immediately I've got all my existing apps with the descriptions. Now interesting, here's a good example. So in Microsoft Teams, I have an apostrophe. So this must be only an issue with application groups. Let me just validate this. So Microsoft Teams, I wonder, is it specific to that field or is it specific just to application groups? I'll have to play with that some more. So Microsoft Teams, we look at the properties of that. I have an apostrophe and the description down here. So I just need, we'll come back to this. I'll confirm that later. Let's just make sure, what do we have here? Let's just review this, make sure what apps do we have. I have Teams. You know what we'll do? We'll create Putty as its own application group to test this theory. So we'll come back to that. I'll basically put apostrophes in the description of the application group just to see what happens. Does it bomb? I don't want to bomb in the middle of this video, so right. So there's our new group here, and it's no apostrophe in the description for the URL, support URL. We're not going to use this machine. I actually want to, because I already have those apps installed, so I want to actually use our other test machine here. Let's do a machine policy update. Add a few times. Add a minute to bake. And there is our new bundle. Now, none of these other apps are installed on this particular VM. Not installed. Teams is not installed. Slackware is not installed. Shot also not installed. Mozilla is not installed. Neither is Cisco. Okay, so machine policy update. We'll click on our new group, and again, notice the difference. What's new for sales? I corrected that here. I had an apostrophe in this one originally. What's new for sales? So I removed that. The weird thing is, if you put that apostrophe in there and you deploy this, it'll let you deploy it successfully, but literally these will not show up in here. Any application groups you created previously, like I had this one that I created previously that didn't have any sort of apostrophes in the description or in the URL or the text or anything, these literally will stop showing up. All these other app model apps and packages will continue to show without an issue. So it's very strange. So anyway, so let's click on our application group, click install. Give this a minute. And we can review, let's review some of the log files. Okay, so we have things installing. So let's look at App Enforce. You should see the command line installs for the various apps that we've selected to install. Shot. Okay, green shot finished. Now 7-zip is installing. Teams is installing. Firefox. Okay. Firefox finished. Now we have Slack. I think Slack is the last one. This is the machine-wide installation of Slack. Okay, and I think that's finished. Yes, Slack is done. So if we look at Software Center, no errors. Sweet. Installed. To go. Hope you launch Firefox. That works. If we look at the description for our sales app, our sales application group, we can click on the link to wherever that documentation link that we provided in the application group properties, the metadata that we talked about earlier. If there's a privacy statement link that Open up the website, internal or external. What else? So let's now look at, let's just review the log file. So we have app discovery, app enforce, app group handler. These are the various log files where it talks about the installation state there. Then the other one is the settings agent .log file. So this is, looks all good to go. Again, when I had the incorrect apostrophe in the description, number one, it blocked all of the application groups from showing in Software Center on both of my machines. It also refused to work, basically. So lesson learned, don't use apostrophes in your application group names. Okay, so that's troubleshooting. Again, those are the locations for the log files. And that concludes this video on application groups and the new feature of SCCM 1906. I have the links here for additional references for application groups, what's new in SCC in Configuration Manager 1906 in general. You can also look at the additional information here. One thing I'll note here in the release notes so if you go to what's new in SCCM or what's new in version 1906, scroll down to application groups, you'll notice here there's a link to create application groups, which takes you to this site. And if you notice here, as I was mentioning earlier, starting in 1906, the ability to create a group of applications that you can send to a user or device collection as a single deployment. So again, not true for user, definitely true for device collection. Okay, don't use an apostrophe. Also, known issues, again, only Windows installer or script deployment types, and again, you can only deploy to device collections. Okay, so that concludes our video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. We went through the key features and benefits, the requirements, the known issue, the fact that if you use an apostrophe in the application group name, that becomes an issue. So thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, and I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Thank you.